Hello. So today let's talk about the Canon R8. Now this was a camera that I had to go against my best instincts when I bought it, and I'll go on to explain why. By the way, just a warning, this video is going to be full of contradictions, hypocrisy, and compromise. So if you want something that's a bit less chaotic and a bit more kind of technical and grown up, then head over to one of the other many channels that talk about this camera. If, however, you want a few stories about how I've used it over the last year in my life as a professional photographer, how it fits in with my other gear on assignment, and we'll go on to talk about some of the good things about it and some of the bad things about it, then stick around. So this thing initially came into my hands because I had an overseas assignment that arrived that I needed a second camera for. Now, prior to this, I've been using the Canon R5 and the 5D Mark IV as my kind of main cameras, with a kind of mix-mash of lenses between RF and EF. And that was fine, getting on really well with that. But then this kind of assignment arrived where I just needed to be a bit more lightweight, and I decided that I was going to go fully RF for that particular trip. I looked at all the different options. Really, I should have got the R6 Mark II. That was the obvious choice. I didn't get another R5 because the R5 Mark II was about to come out at that point, and I was still waiting for that. Quite happy with the R5, but didn't want to buy another one that was going to be a bit out of date. And so, also, I've been intrigued by this camera since it launched, which is a kind of budget full-frame mirrorless camera. So I thought, you run a YouTube channel, people have asked me endlessly about the R8, and so I bought one. Now, over the last 30 years, I've been shooting Canon from film cameras through to the early days of digital, and then into mirrorless, all the way through. I've owned pretty much all of them. I've unboxed loads of Canon gear, and it always comes with a sort of bit of bittersweet, kind of like, you've spent a lot of money, is it going to be what you want it to be? And then you unwrap it, and then there's this kind of like waxy white tissue over the cameras, and you pull the camera out and it smells lovely, and it's just like, oh, it's great. I can feel the potential in what this piece of equipment can do for my business and for my creativity. I've never really been disappointed with the credit card bills, yes, but not disappointed with the actual gear. Now, when this thing came, I just felt my heart drop. I kind of pulled it out of the box, and it's just tiny. It felt too small and too plasticky and too toy-like. And, I just felt my heart drop. And I kind of knew almost in that second that I was going to change it for an R6 Mark II. Put a battery in it, powered it up, squinted through the tiny little EVF, which my granddad would have called like looking through a piss hole in the snow, because it's kind of really small. Sorry for cursing for anyone with sensitivities to those things. Yeah, I played with it for a bit. I immediately just was disappointed. So I phoned up my dealer. I was about to leave the next day to go away. Phoned up my dealer, said, look, I'm coming to the airport tomorrow to go on a site. Can I flip this camera out for an R6 Mark II? He goes, yeah, call him. Perfect. That was it. Threw all the gear into various different bags and, cut a long story short, head off on assignment. Now, some people will think this is unprofessional, and I would agree not to have the perfect setup in advance before your trip, and most of the time I try and do that, but life doesn't always work like that, right? Life just sometimes kind of throws you curveballs, and this was one of those occasions. Now, I get onto the motorway to go to the airport, to go into central London. Central London traffic is a mess, can't get in, have to run to the airport instead of going to the dealers, and at that moment I kind of go, well, I'm just gonna have to make it work. We've been thrown together, me and the R8 have been thrown together. Still got my R5, got all the lenses, it'll be a backup, right? Bit disappointed because I've got the initial kind of feelings about it. Well, it's just not a professional tool, no way, like forget it, need something different. Should have got the R6 Mark II. Anyway, I'm then in the airport packing camera equipment into a case to kind of put onto my back and get, working everything out. And that was when the first kind of inkling of attraction appeared, because as a backup camera, as a second camera, it's got a little grip on it at the moment, we'll talk about that in a minute. This thing is tiny, so it just kind of slots into anywhere in your bag, and it's just invisible, okay? So that happened, and I was like, that's interesting, kind of cool. Obviously it's small, right? Obviously, we know that. Anyway, get overseas, start shooting on the R5, everything's cool. haven't even really used this. Fired a few frames to make sure it's okay, but nothing more than that. Make sure everything's working, operational. Yes, 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 yes. All good. Okay, so then one night, late one night, after shooting's finished, I'm going for a wander around and I stumble upon a dress rehearsal of a theatrical performance, and which is kind of connected with what I was shooting. I won't go into too many details, but it was very dark. And I had this car just thrown this over my shoulder, kind of just out of, I don't even know why, just because it's so small and light. I had this with the 100 to 400mm lens on it over my shoulder, not intending to shoot anything. This theatrical performance comes on, and there's this really extravagant part of the show with water flying everywhere and gymnasts and acrobats and stuff. And I can't resist dropping a few frames. Because that lens is dark, I have to crank the ISO on this thing right up to something like, I don't know, like 20,000 ISO or something crazy to get the shutter speed that I need. And I drop a few frames, ding, 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 with that little electronic shutter in there. Don't really think anything more of it, to be perfectly honest, until I get back to where I'm editing the next day, pop the card in, just out of interest, have a look, and I'm sort of immediately taken back by the pictures, because actually they're sharp, there's not very much noise, a little bit of noise reduction in Lightroom, a little bit of, editing, post-production, picture's good to go. And I'm like, holy smoke, the sensor on this thing is amazing. And that was the second point of then turning from total hatred to, oh, this is an interesting camera. I then use it a little bit on the rest of the assignment, and I'm constantly blown away by the sensor. Don't like using it very much, to be perfectly honest, but I'm blown away by the sensor. So it kind of becomes, it's obvious, right? This thing's got the same sensor as the R6 Mark II and the R3, I believe. I think there might be a few different aspects to it, but roughly in terms of resolution and the kind of output of the images. And so the image quality is fantastic. So as a backup camera, it's really it's beginning to really sort of earn its money, I guess. My biggest problem with it at that point is just everything's so small, okay? I use it, it's fine, does its job. I come back and I'm still thinking, you know what, I'm just going to get rid of this, and I'm going to then trade it for an R6 probably or something like that, or the R5 Mark II when it appears. However, I come back and I start looking on the web. And also in the back of my mind, right, there is this holy grail thing that I've been seeking for a while. And like I said, this video is full of hypocrisy, okay? So don't shoot me for that. I'm just telling you it from my heart. I've been using these big cameras for years, right, with big, heavy lenses and stuff. And for the longest time, I've been looking for kind of a small, lightweight, portable camera system. I thought I had it in Leica, but that was never kind of perfect. I thought I had it in Fuji, but again, that was never quite perfect. And I kind of ran into a problem where I didn't really want, I've had multiple camera systems over the years, and I really didn't want that again. I want to simplify. And so in the back of my mind, there is this need for something that is small and lightweight. And I bought a couple of lightweight lenses when I bought this camera as well. And I started to sort of formulate this plan. Wouldn't it be nice to have a kind of lightweight kit? People talk about it all the time, rather than having to drag all of this stuff, something that's kind of cool. So with that in mind, I thought, well, maybe I'll give it another go. Maybe I see if I can work this camera. Maybe I can see if I can turn this camera into something that will work for me. Do a little bit of Googling around of what other people are saying. And I find that you can get a grip, because I've got big hands, right? I'm a big caveman with big hands. And the problem that I've had is the buttons are all a little bit small on this thing. And I bought this, I found someone on Facebook Marketplace selling this grip, and I messaged him, sent him the money, bought it, bang, on it goes. The transformation for me personally is significant, and it means that rather than being something that my hand just kind of like holding it like a little kind of toy, it means it's something that I can actually grip. A few other changes as well that I made, a few different bits and pieces that I think make it better, which I won't go into now. And suddenly it sort of transforms and I start using it, and out of sort of hatred has grown this kind of sort of blossoming love affair, I suppose you might say. We're a year in. I'm still using the R5 as my main camera, but I do find myself drawn towards this little thing. It's kind of got under my skin. Now, what I think we need to do at this stage is to talk about all the different aspects of it, me stop waffling so much, and let's talk about the sensor to begin with. Now, the ISO capability is extraordinary. If you have an interest in this camera, that's all you really need to know, is that it's extraordinary. The dynamic range is as good as anything else that I've used. Certainly, it's just enough. There's more than enough dynamic range, and there's more than enough ISO capability in this camera for anybody to be able to do anything that they want, in my opinion. As soon as you start going beyond the capability of this thing for either of those things, you're into a whole different world. And so I would start to sort of question whether you're, maybe you need to look at your technique or the lenses that you're using or your lighting, simple as that. Anyway, what about resolution? It's 20-something megapixels, which felt like a lot less coming from the R5, right? Have I noticed that in everyday use, in everyday professional use? Absolutely not at all. Not at all. It's just not an issue. There are occasional times, and I've said about this before, where I am shooting a project where I'm going to need to supply multiple formats. Let's say a really skinny little landscape crop, and then a square and an upright, and a variety of different crops so that, let's say, an advertising agency can use it for multiple different purposes. That's where the R5 shines, because I know I can heavily crop those images and it'll all be cool. You can heavily crop these pictures, but just not quite as much because there's not enough resolution. Is it good enough for everything else? Yes, simple as. And the colour that comes out of it is great. I think better than the R5. What's next? Okay, so it has an electronic shutter. Now, a lot of people, I've read a lot of people saying it doesn't have a mechanical shutter. That's a bad thing. I thought that was a bad thing as well. There's two different types of shutters. The electronic first curtain, which, as far as I can tell, has no rolling shutter at all. And rolling shutter is where, if you're photographing something at very high speed, it can cause a little bit of distortion on the subject. But it has to be really high speed, like typically a baseball bat or a golf club swinging. Electronic first shutter runs at 6 frames per second and doesn't have that problem, apparently. Don't ask me about the technical aspects of why it does it, because I have not a clue. But then you have the truly electronic shutter, which runs at 40 frames per second, which tends to, what I understand from other people, tends to exhibit that problem more. However, I have not seen it at all. Now, that might just be because I'm not photographing golf clubs or baseballs, but baseball clubs, or whatever you call them. But to me, haven't had a problem with that. And it runs at 40 frames per second in that electronic shutter mode. Only for 1 second, though. And I've heard people kind of moaning about that. But the truth of that is that if you're photographing something that, 6 frames a second is fine for most things. Most things are fine at 6 frames per second. If you're photographing something that you want faster, 40 frames per second, then a second is a really long time. You just need to time your shots better and be a little bit selective about what you're shooting, because you need to wait for a few seconds for the buffer to clear after that 1 second of full 40 frames per second, right? But yeah, you can make that work. If you can't make that work, then you're either shooting something that is very extraordinarily specific, like let's say eagles catching salmon out of a river. If that's your thing, then probably you already know that you need something that's much more specific to what you need. Or you're shooting Premiership football, let's say Premier Football, or high-end whatever, you might need something different. But for most people, for most uses, it will be absolutely fine. If you want to try like some high-speed kind of, capture some very cool, fast photography, it will do everything that you want it to do. What's next? Okay, so people talk about the battery. It has these little batteries, right? That again, I should have got the R6 Mark II because that shares the same battery system as all of these things. One charger, bunch of batteries, you're good to go, right? Didn't do that. Got that one wrong. This one's got little batteries. Now, honestly, people kind of say the batteries don't last through. I've found the batteries to be actually okay. I haven't really had a problem. You do need to carry spares. You can't just have one. But then that's the same with the R5 as well. So you'll get a few more frames out of the R5 battery or the R6 Mark II battery, that's for sure, because they're bigger. However, I've been really impressed with these. I've got a bunch of the Canon ones, and also I bought this really for a very specific purpose. And again, there'll be people that go, "Ooh, you should only use Canon, whatever." everyone has to make their own choice, right? But I had need to go kind of off grid. And so I had need for something that would be a USB-C charger. The batteries could charge with a USB-B charger. By the way, you can run this camera off of one of these battery packs while it's recording video. And that's really cool. And it will charge a battery as well. But I bought a bunch of these little blue batteries as well as the Canon ones. And they're as cheap as chips, and they just go into this USB-C this USB charger, and you can charge them up multiple times from one of these power banks. And I haven't had any trouble at all with these. I've used them alongside my Canon batteries, intermix. They last about roughly the same time. I'm not recommending that you should go out and buy generic batteries, because these things can blow up. They could do anything. Who knows? They're unknown quantities. But for me, it's been fine. And I recently did a video project where I needed to leave this thing running because this thing has a great long, it doesn't have that 30-minute cut off on video. So I gaffer taped this to the leg of my tripod and just left the camera running for about an hour. I think it ran for about an hour. Overheating issues in video. We're not talking about video, but while I'm on it, we'll talk about it. In video, because a lot of the Canon R series cameras have had that problem with overheating in 4K video. And there is a temperature gauge on it, and in an hour of video it was starting to get hot, but it didn't turn off. Nothing bad happened. I was thinking about kind of in the future maybe I would try and attach like a silent fan or something. I don't know, who knows. But yeah, fine. By the way, video, really cool. 4K video. I didn't buy it for that. It just happens that it has really cool 4K video at 50 frames per second. Looks great. Right. SD card. This is another issue that people have talked about. This thing only has a single SD card. Are we going to talk about that? What do you think? Let's not go there. Let's not talk about that today. It only has one SD card. Everyone has to make their own mind up about those different things. I'm a big fan of using dual SD cards, so it's not perfect. However, this is a conversation for another time. What I would say is that if you're going to use a camera with only one single card slot, then use a professional grade card, the best card that you can get, and use good technique in the way that you work. And, if you want to, I could talk about that in another video to ensure that you give yourself the best chance. Not ideal, but it is what it is, right? What's next? Autofocus. Okay, so I read a bit about everyone saying that this thing's got the same autofocus system as the R6 Mark II and the R3, and it's great. The AF system, in terms of the actual engine of the AF system, works really well. Whether it's as good as the others, I don't know. Is it as good as the R5? I'd say it's comparable, to be perfectly honest. Not, comparable. And you need to customize these things to get the best out of them for your specific requirements. The thing that it doesn't have, and that is annoying, is it doesn't have the joystick, which the joystick I typically use. I use a mixture of AF stuff. I use kind of IAF and also single area that, I move around and I mostly use servo focus. I'll talk about the settings again in another time if you want, but it doesn't have that joystick for moving the select spot around, which is annoying. That's annoying. But there are workarounds, again. So the AF system in itself is great, but the controls aren't. Simple as that. But there are workarounds. Okay, so let's talk about the actual build size of this thing. Let's put that over there. I've had this grip on there for so long now that I cannot actually undo it. It's too tight. It's a bit small. Honestly, if you've got big hands, if you're someone with big hands and you're a bit of a dinosaur and you like things a little bit clunky and mechanical, get a different camera. Don't get this, too small. If you're young, agile, with nimble fingers and not great big monkey hands like me, then you wouldn't probably even notice. Super lightweight. Lightweight, even though it's not that much different to the other cameras, it feels different. The batteries everything about it feels different. You can put two of these batteries in your pocket and you can forget about them, and you'll find them that they're still in your pocket at bedtime, and you haven't, been walking around with your trousers falling down. That's important. Anyone that's done long shoots with batteries in their pocket will know what I'm talking about. You know, particularly with the anyone remember those old 1DS batteries? It's like 2 of those in your pocket, and you kind of, you know, you can't walk after about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. But that's nice for these things. And the packability of it, even though again it's not that, it shares a similar body with the old RP. But the size of it means that you can just kind of stick it into things that you wouldn't be able to fit other cameras into. So I've been using this lovely bag for my travel kit, and it just fits nicely in. And again, that's important with that kind of travel thing in mind, right? Or lightweight camera setup, let's say, or vlogging. You know, if you want to vlog with this thing, which you could, or you want to put it on different kind of mounts, it just, that small size does make a big difference. Right, what else do we have to talk about? The camera size, right? We're on to that. The actual controls, although small, are much better than the R5. This isn't a comparison with the R5, but I just think the evolution of design of where levers and things are make a lot of sense. Yeah, I like the on-off switch and the video and stills button. I like the dial as opposed to the craziness on the R5. It's customizable, maybe not quite as customizable as some of the other cameras, but it's kind of, you know, good. You can make the buttons do what you want them to do. And so, you know, we're talking hypocrisy, right? Because I'm saying it's too small, you can't get your hands on it to control it, but I'm saying that I like it because it's small. That's hypocrisy, right? It's a compromise. Each of you, if you have an interest in this camera or thinking about buying it, everyone will have to sort of work out where this fits for them. In-body image stabilization, it doesn't have it. The R5 and the R6 Mark II have that, which, you know, there's 2 very specific different areas of that we should talk about. In video mode, IBIS is very useful, especially for hand-holding video. But this thing does have some kind of ninja inbuilt digital IS for video. Now, don't ask me how that works, but it actually works quite well. Not as well as in-body image stabilization, but with the stabilization of some of the lenses, then you can kind of make it work. Can absolutely make it work. For stills mode, in-body image stabilization is a little bit weird because people sort of hold it up. I hold it up as the holy grail sometimes, but it's not actually the holy grail all of the time because it doesn't count for subject movement. So let's say you want to take a nice picture of a church at night. In-body image stabilization is great because it allows you to use a slightly slower shutter speed than you'd be able to handheld at normally. The argument is, if you're doing that, wouldn't you have been better off putting it on a tripod, lower your ISO, and actually take a more thoughtful photograph rather than just trying to use technology to get away with something? However, it is very useful. So I use in-body image, let's call it IBIS. I use IBIS often and find it very useful, but it's not the holy grail. If there's subjects involved that are moving around, then it's of limited use because you still have the subject movement. So I've not really missed it, to be perfectly honest. I've not really missed it. And I think, you know, you have to again look at what you're, you know, if you're buying a camera to walk around in the evening photographing churches without a tripod, then you probably want one with in-body image stabilization. If you're not doing that all the time, then you'll probably be all right with one of these. Right. I wanted also to talk about the wee hole in the snow, the EVF. It's small and it's slightly lower resolution than some other cameras, but you get used to it and it's okay and you can work with it. And the screen again is smaller. It's annoying because it's smaller, but these things are a compromise, right? And I found, even with my big stupid hands and my big stupid head and my funny eyes and my funny nose, I can still use it with I've made a few changes, but it's fine. So to summarise, who do I think this is for? Who do I think this is not for? You know, and to give you my final thoughts. So, as a route into full frame digital photography for a beginner, I think it's a reasonable camera. I think that you will make absolute absolutely great pictures with it. Are there other options out there that might kind of make things a little bit simpler for you? Honestly, you know, if you want a mirrorless camera at this price point, then this is the one for you. I would sort of argue whether or not you should be looking at sort of, you know, if you're just getting into photography, maybe some of the used DSLRs could still be sort of interest, or certainly worth having a look at, put it that way. Certainly you can get great value lenses, huge line of lenses for the DSLR cameras at a reasonable price. And you could then adapt those lenses if you wanted to go mirrorless into the future. So yeah, you know, if you want a mirrorless full frame camera at this price point, then this is definitely the one for you. But it might be worth looking at some other things. If you're a professional, I wouldn't say it would make the ideal first camera for a professional, honestly. But as a backup or a travel camera or a sort of add-on to your normal kit, then second camera, yeah. You know, so in summary, it's really got under my skin. It started off as a hate thing. It's ended up as a love thing. And I really hope that this video has been of some use to you along the way. If you have any other questions about the camera, about my experiences of using it, then, you know, drop them into the comments. I hope it's not been too rambly or hypocritical. You know, there's a bit of a theme in the world of kind of online photography things for people to sort of be quite judgmental and want everything to be in straight lines. That's not how it ever has been for me in my life. I've been shooting professionally for decades, and it's never been, I've never had all of the right kit at the right time. I've never had, you know, completely the right answer to everything. And I've never had a camera that is completely perfect in every way. There's always different places to go. You just need to try and make sure that you have kind of the right tools for the job, and learn to live with the compromises along the way. And that's just how it is. So, you know, hope this has been useful. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.